Yeah, she's coming down pretty good. Might just wait this one out for a little bit. All right, we got a bit of a mess going on here, and I forgot a bag, so that's gonna complicate things. But we have a cocktail here that, if I'm counting right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ingredients in this cocktail. And order matters. So I'm gonna mix some up ahead of time, give my, yeah, it's a lot going on. So we've got Audible and Everest going on ahead of the Durum. I'm also putting manipulator on. This is a growth regulator, and I'm putting my crop aid on. So we've got a lot going on, and it's got to go in a certain order. All right, let's mix up a spray cocktail going on here. Fire up the pump. I've got water going into the sprayer and into the Chembine right now. I am pouring draft in as well. And eventually, once the Chembine has enough water, I'll flip a valve and it'll recirculate. I'll touch on that in a second. Right now, checking the recipe. Going to start pouring in some Everest. It's real thick. It's a clay-based suspension kind of thing. They tell you not to bash jugs, just shake them up, pour in, and rinse. So I'm getting to the point where the Chembine's pretty much full of water, so I'll flip the valve to recirculate. So now nothing's going into the sprayer, it's just cycling around. I'm going to double check my recipe and flip it back so we're pumping away. And now we're sucking out of the Chembine. Draft is away, or on its way. Once that's done, I can switch over to the other side, or not. I can just pound my Audible in and bash jugs. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, I forgot to grab a jug bag. So I was mixing off some more water for the Everest. It's pumping away right now. It was. Now I swapped back. Got a lot going on. That hose is pumping into the small container, right? Not quite yet. It's not open yet. There it is. As you can see, that's the growth manipulator. It's to keep the durum shorter so it grows less straw, in hopes that it puts more nutrients to yield than it does to height. Finally, towards the end, I have to add that, I believe that was Kesol 90, which is adjuvant, surfactant, and we're pumping the final things away, except for right now I'm filling up with crop aid. And crop aid's the micronutrient that I typically use. All right, got the sprayer going out in the field, more specifically Dad in the sprayer out in the field, and I'm piloting the drone. I don't think he even knew I was doing this until I buzzed him. We are spraying that same cocktail on durum. Okay, for those of you that are not so familiar with spraying, this is our second pass of the sprayer on this field this year. Our first pass would have occurred probably 3 weeks or so earlier. I'd have to check the books for the exact date. But we try to spray just before seeding or just before emergence. And the idea is to wipe the slate clean, to kill everything that's out there, so that the seeds, as they're germinating and as they're just popping through, when they're nice small plants, they're not having to compete with bigger weeds that are beside. And that gets everything at the same stage, so that when we come back to do in-crop, which is happening today, that everything is at the same stage, and that'll help maximize our yield. In-crop herbicide is probably the most stressful spraying you can do, because you can definitely harm the field. Too much of a certain chemical, or the wrong chemical, or the right chemical at the wrong time, you can do a lot of damage. Because of the potential for a catastrophic disaster, we have to work very closely with agronomists to make sure that we're spraying the right chemical on the right crop at the right rate at the right time for the right weeds for the right price. There's a lot going on that needs to happen to have a successful spray. So the key thing to know here is that not all chemicals work the same or target the same weeds or can be sprayed on the same host crop, the host crop being durum in this field. Some chemicals work in different ways. They call them groups. And for example, they might target a particular protein in a weed that doesn't exist in the wheat plant or the durum or something along those lines. Or there is a window of growth that they will tolerate it up until after you've made sure you have the right chemicals and the right rate and the right host crop and all that. It's timing that is so critical, because if you can spray between the rows where there are small weeds growing right now and they get their chemical and they die off right before the host crop decides to start growing and then steal all the sunlight and they start to expand, and we call it canopy over, where there gets to the point where there's no actual sunlight or very little getting to the ground, so that any small plants do not have enough energy to thrive and will eventually die off. And at that point, the crop takes care of itself. One of the last things I wanted to point out is it was not by design whatsoever, but you can really see what happened in the field the higher up you go with the drone. Those 3 little potholes in the top right corner, we had to seed completely around those. They were way too wet, and 3 weeks later we're going straight through them. You can see wheat stubble beside, that's the golden stuff up top. That's got canola planted in it, but it's barely emerged yet. You can really see lots of other tracks in the field as far as combine tracks or out with the harrows. You can see a couple of turns in there that are at we like to combine at about a 10 to 15 degree angle. You can see one spot where Dad must have either Dad or Jim or Doug, I'm not sure who was running combine that day, probably had to turn around because they were too full and weren't going to make it to the other side, so they had to turn around for the grain cart. The higher I go with the drone, the thinner the crop coverage will look. But keep in mind, in a matter of days, this is going to canopy over and will look very green. Now, obviously the camera doesn't show the contour of the field all that well, but you can kind of tell what's slightly lower versus what's slightly higher, as the lower spots are a little greener, a little better fill to them, but they'll catch up. One final topic that somebody asked of me a little while back is, what does the sprayer do physically as damage to the field by the tires? And at this point, at this stage in life, the crop is very young, very flexible, and it will get tramped down, but it'll pop back up in a few days, and you will hardly notice it after a week. And when it gets to be fungicide timing, you almost guarantee will not be able to tell where the sprayer went first go around. However, later on in the season, when we get to spraying fungicide or desiccating, the crop doesn't recover from it. It's too far in the growth cycle. So we put the skinnier tires on for that. The fatter tires are 710s, the skinniers are 385s or 380s. And the fatter tires go through a lot more mud and they're a better ride, but the skinnier tires do much less crop damage. Just wanted to take this opportunity to say thanks for watching. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or just want to reach out and say hi, please leave me a comment below. I try and answer every one. So if you can, please like, subscribe, share, and tell your friends. I appreciate it. Take care, everybody. Hope you have a great day.